latest one.
All right, welcome to the program. Live here at YouTube and subscribing platforms. Charles Moscowitz, Michael D. Shaw is my guest, as is the case usually on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Mike, how are you?
Just great.
Let me just fix my volume here. I'm getting like a. There it is. I have to switch headphones. Yeah. Thank you. Um, so the election is less than a week away, and I am feeling depressed. I mean, I can't describe it any other way. I'm just, the nervousness that I feel. I mean, I can't sleep.
Really?
I mean, I'm having trouble staying calm. I'm not kidding. I feel so wrapped up in this. Maybe it's because I do a lot of podcasting and, I'm kind of a news junkie, but I just feel like there's just so much going on, so much at stake. The forces that are arrayed against President Trump are so fierce. I think that they are ramping up the pandemic just in time to coincide with Election Day. That's my opinion. I can't prove that, but it just does seem to be awfully coincidental to me, knowing that the big vote coming out as you approach Election Day and on Election Day is going to be the Trump vote. All of a sudden, people are being criticized for going outside, and there's a real ramping up of fear and criticism that somehow President Trump is responsible for the COVID, and the fact that he won't tell people to not not go out is he's responsible for. I mean, some of the tweets I'm seeing are so disgusting. That he's responsible for the murders of 100,000 people and this kind of stuff.
Well, remember, Twitter isn't real life. And it's hard for people that are on it a lot to realize that.
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought that you would have been a little more positive because some of the news is looking pretty good.
Well, I'm glad you're here, Mike, because please tell me what that is.
Okay, well, let's see. I'm taking from my buddy Kevin Collins.
It looks like, based on Rasmussen's likely voters, Trump is ahead 49-46 in Florida, and the undecideds are leaning 50-46 Trump. North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Democrats have actually lost registered voters, while Republicans have gained. In Florida and Nevada, Republicans have outpaced Democrats in voter registrations. In other battleground states, Trump counties have outregistered Clinton counties 2-1. Trump is doing much better, and this is much closer than the Democrats and mainstream media would have you believe. Since 2016, Wisconsin has lost 145,000 voters, showing young people have fled the state.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, let's see, 54% on a Rasmussen poll of likely voters say Biden is guilty in the scandal involving his son. But here's some really interesting stuff. Based on something that was actually in the New York Times, they show Trump, that's Donald Trump, carrying 24% of Philadelphia.
Oh, that's incredible. Although I think we ought to caution people to note that Philadelphia is one of the most corrupt political machines going way back. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Chris Matthews even talked about growing up in Philadelphia and seeing when he first got into politics how they would start to fill out votes after the polls closed. I mean, people who didn't show up.
Okay, well, here's something else that you might like. If Trump carries 24% of Philadelphia, barring massive fraud, he will easily win Pennsylvania. And
I'm looking at the Drudge Report here. It says that Biden is up 17 in Wisconsin. He's taken a slim lead in Georgia.
17.
That Texas, 17%. Let me tell you the poll. That Texas is now in play.
Oh, good.
Now, again, I mean, when I read this stuff, I mean, my heart sinks. Now, again, It's up. Okay, here it is. COVID surge hurts Trump in Wisconsin. Biden leads in a closer Michigan contest, which tells me that maybe Michigan is good for Trump. But it says here, and this is Biden leads Trump by 57-40 among likely voters in Wisconsin, and this is according to whom? Nope, it's the same. It's ABC News. I don't know if I mean, I don't trust them.
Trafalgar would disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't trust them, but yet, it does make me nervous.
Well, maybe you're getting too much information.
I probably am. I'm looking at this stuff, I will admit, somewhat obsessively here.
Somewhat. Somewhat.
Yeah, to put it mildly. Let's see. Now, this is a crazy one, but the Economist, which isn't even an American magazine, it's British, they said that there's a 94% likelihood that Biden is going to win. Now, where they came up with that, who knows?
Well, I think it's gotten to the point that people feel, and I think it occurs more on the left, but people feel more liberated to make outrageous statements because no one's going to check them on it. I mean, in a completely unrelated matter, I heard somebody on the radio talking about how important it is for Trump to support wind power, because now get this, in the Midwest, especially in Iowa, this guy claimed that 40% of the energy comes from wind, which is preposterous.
That's a lie. Yeah,
okay.
That's untrue.
So, and they also said in Iowa, 10,000 people are employed by the wind industry. So someone is just picking ridiculous numbers out of the air. They're on some reasonably big radio station here in the area. And I was stupefied. He wasn't.
Those are outright lies. And by the way, Trump does not support wind power. I mean, I think that wind power is probably as supported by Trump as it was by Obama. It's not
the
like
whole thing was crazy. But here's the continuation on the Kevin Collins stuff. If Trump carries, if he does carry 24% of Philadelphia, he should win Pennsylvania easily. But here's the point he makes. If this was from the New York Times saying 24%, he thinks it's actually more like 30, but 24% is 9 points greater than what Trump got in Philly in 2016.
So Michael, are you saying that the New York Times has said that he's got 24% of Philly?
Yes.
That's incredible. All right. Well, that's great, because
that was
Pennsylvania is going to decide the election. I mean, I think that's clear.
Yeah. Here's the general point. Okay. And if he wins, and if this victory shows a higher support of minorities for Republicans than ever before, then I would argue that most of the Democratic narrative has completely disintegrated.
I mean, it would be a beautiful thing. And I do think that, on a positive note, he is making inroads. I don't think anyone denies it among minorities. Yeah, Hispanics. He's, I think the polling I saw, it was up to like 40%. In Florida, it's tipping the balance, and now Florida is, I think Trump's ahead by 3 outside of the margin of error. Blacks, he's up, according to Rasmussen, 47%. That's incredible. I mean, that's unthinkable.
Well,
and even Jews. I mean, New York City, big rallies, Jews for Trump. People throwing garbage at them, and they're coming up by the thousands. That can make a big difference in New York. So that's his natural constituency, minorities.
What's interesting about that is that this is why I think there's this big push on systemic racism and so on, because my feeling is that all this minorities for Democrats thing, this is older generation stuff. I mean, let's be honest. If you're under 30 years old and you're a minority, you've never been discriminated against. In fact, you've been favored most of your life in most things. So this just isn't ringing true with the younger people. And if you go to these various shows like Charlemagne the God and so on, that's essentially the point that he's making, is that the younger minorities don't identify with this victimhood thing as much as the older generation. And case in point, the Washington Times was talking about Trump's going to do better with minorities, but maybe not as good as he thinks. And what they cite is 53-year-old black woman, blah, blah, whatever her name was, was cited as, yes, I'm going to go for Biden because Trump is going to turn the clock back 200 years. But I don't think the younger people are buying into that anymore.
That's amazing. I mean, I think that if that's true, then that's going to be a real cultural shift. I think that I'm not sure I agree. I mean, I think that younger people are still part of this whole politically correct movement, especially college age. They haven't broken out of it. They will eventually. I don't know if they will in time, but I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a quiet movement among young people who are very quietly breaking out, because you have to be careful. If you put up a Trump sign, you can end up losing your position. I mean, it's a very dangerous thing.
But what if you don't put up that Trump sign?
But go out and vote for Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, that'll be amazing.
I mean, that is really where, I mean, Trafalgar has been making this point all the way through, that you just can't call people and so on because they're ashamed or afraid to answer. So he uses other methods, but he's saying that the pollsters are making the same mistakes they did in 2016. And in 2016, he was telling them they were making these mistakes. And everyone was laughing at the guy. Oh, you're crazy.
I don't know if this is also a sign, but I mean, I follow some of the social media besides Twitter. I like to look at TikTok and I look at some of these other things. And a lot of the left wingers on those platforms seem to be becoming so extreme and enraged and unglued. And, these charges against Trump are so hateful and so fraught with rage.
It's all hate.
That tells me that that's good news, because they're desperate, because the whole thing, I mean, the entire Democrat ticket, the entire Biden thing is based, they've got nothing other than hatred for Trump. And I think that, they've got the big media behind them. They certainly have big tech behind them, but yet, I think it's wearing thin. People are looking at this thing and saying, this is insane. I mean, it doesn't
it's the old story. Okay. The more you suppress something, the more people want to see it. I mean, what would draw someone to start fishing? As they say, the no fishing sign. So if I tell you that you can't look at this stuff, it's funny how many people have found out about it, though, isn't it?
Well, something, I think that might be the dynamic with the Biden scandals.
Yeah.
The big tech and Twitter actually took down the New York Post, and articles, and that made people want to find out more about it. You had to do a little more digging. You had to find out about the corruption, and it is absolutely colossal. The amount of, and this is a rotten, corrupt hack that's been in office for almost 40 years. It's thank you. He's enriched his two brothers, his son-in-law, his daughter, and using them as straws and pushing them out there to make these deals with him getting a cut. I mean, this is like the way, it's like the Sopranos. I mean, it's sort of, the family, it's keep the family close. I mean, it's so rotten that I think that as people dig into it, it's becoming more obvious. And now you have Hunter Biden's business partner blowing the whistle like crazy. And this is a legitimate guy. If this had been anyone else, it would have been front page news, back to back, day after day. But they're doing everything they can to suppress it. You're not going to hear Lester Holt talk about this.
No, but I'll tell you this: the suppression is becoming half-hearted in this sense. Before, the mantra was Russian disinformation, Russia. All right, they're not saying that anymore. They say stuff like "yet to be verified."
What a bunch of crap. I mean, yet to be verified. They had no problem going, as you say, going out with the Russia's crap. I mean, which was completely unverified. And this stuff is verified. You've got the laptop, more than the laptop. You've got other laptops. And you've got people who received those emails who are verifying it. And you've got videos and photos. You can't fake that. Do you think the Ruskies are going to fake these sex videos with Hunter Biden and underage Chinese girls, or Joe Biden, showering with his teenage daughter, or Hunter Biden walking around naked with his niece? I don't think so. Those things can't be fabricated.
Well,
Those things are
and
on the
that stuff,
computer.
and that stuff, as you know, is out there.
Oh yeah, I mean,
There are people
and
going on websites and finding this stuff.
and that's the kind of stuff that people are going to dig for that one.
Yeah.
They're not, they can't keep that one under wraps. And if this had been any other politician, it would be front page. And by the way, it is being widely covered in foreign press. The British,
absolutely.
the Australians, Taiwan. I mean, we could go to various other countries around the world which have a more free press than we do, actually. And they're doing this full force. I mean, they're looking at all of it. We had recently even the scandal with Biden sexually assaulting Tara Reid. 60 Minutes did an interview and they ran it in Australia, not here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, our press is really, it's almost like Soviet style. It's gotten that bad.
Well, I would argue that it always was pretty bad, except there was no other frame of reference. You didn't have anything but the three networks. And
right.
Okay.
Yeah, you had Uncle Walter, right? Exactly.
Yeah, let me correct that. The only other media, and there were fringe papers like the Spotlight. The John Birch Society had some information, but there was no internet.
Right.
So you really had to be tuned in and not be afraid to go to so-called fringe media to find some of this stuff. But all they're doing on a daily basis, that line from Trump was wonderful. When Leslie Stahl says, "Are you trying to discredit us?" She said, Trump said, "No, you're discrediting yourself."
Very revealing, and it just shows how they slice and dice something, and what a bunch of frauds. Anyways, everyone's known that for years. Trump has done a great service by exposing that.
Are there people who are upset by the fact that, I mean, obviously Uncle Walter is gone, but Leslie Stahl almost goes back to that era.
Yeah, she's like
and all these name personalities, and you're finding that it was nothing more than a lot of crap. I mean, in a related matter,
it's all been exposed. I mean, who is it? Douglas Brinkley did the official biography of Walter Cronkite, and he's a liberal left-wing guy, but he blew the whistle on Cronkite. He showed how Cronkite was way out on the left, and how he slanted stories and kind of I wouldn't say made stuff up, but there's a way to make something look a certain way by omission,
right?
And by crafting it and forming it in such a way that it creates a false impression without outright lying.
You mean like the Tet Offensive story?
Yeah, that's right, exactly, which was a victory for the South Vietnamese, and it was completely changed around. Or there were a lot of examples of that. I mean, the Gulf of Tonkin, for that matter.
Yeah.
I mean, these things were false stories that were promoted by the Mockingbird media. We know that when I say Mockingbird media, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The Church Committee investigation of the CIA exposed in the late 1970s the fact that Operation Mockingbird was literally the CIA paying media figures under the table in cash, large sums of money to report things in a certain way. And I don't think much of that testimony remains classified. There's no evidence that policy has ever stopped.
Well, I mean, the sad part is they probably don't have to pay him off anymore.
No, there were a bunch of, you get people like Rachel Maddow. I can't wait. Oh my God. If Trump wins, I can't wait to see her face on television again, like last time. That's worth it right there. I mean, go out, vote for Trump just to see this.
Well, I mean, what's funny there is, frankly, it might not be as bad because I think once burned, twice shy, she may be more prepared for it. Let me say that.
Right. The face isn't going to fall so far because, I mean, although they're doing the same thing they did last time, Trump is behind by 20 points. He's behind by 90 points. Why not go all the way? And then, and I think that the final play is going to be the coronavirus, and that all of a sudden, interestingly, there's this massive uptick, and states are going to start to lock down. Massachusetts is already totally on board with that one.
But how are people dealing with that? I mean, forget about what the government says. How many people are still buying? I think that
people, people who are, it does break down politically and ideologically. People on the left have the biggest masks, and they're hiding and cowering. And people who are maybe more mainstream or more conservative, you take precautions, but you go out. You go to Cafe Nero and you have your coffee. You might not go in and sit down at the table, but you sit at the table outside. You may put a mask on while you're there ordering, but when you get out and you sit down, you take it off. And you don't wear it. I mean, I see people who wear it constantly on the street when there's no one around.
Well, I've seen people wear them in their cars, which I think
which is dangerous, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not healthy anyways, because you're inhaling your own.
Because they block some of your peripheral vision.
Right. I can't wear it too long. I can't breathe. I mean, and you're rebreathing your own air. I mean, there are
right. Well, the CO2.
Exactly. And people passing out in their cars. I mean, and I do think that it's interesting that it does seem to fall on ideological lines. Now, putting aside the fact that you have people who have pre-existing conditions or who are, 80 and older.
Right.
Yeah, I get that. They shouldn't go out. They probably should isolate at this time. But I'm talking about generally the rest of the population. I mean, it does seem to break down that way.
Yeah, well, maybe the left. Well, here was the other thing. This ties in, I would argue, with the Immigration Act of 1965. And here's where I'm headed with this. The idea was that they were going to open it up to non-Euros. And of course, as was famously said by your favorite son, Teddy Kennedy, it is not our intent to change the face of America, but obviously that's what occurred. All right, here was the reasoning. Once you get away from, especially Western Europe, you're now bringing in a pool of people that in general don't have real experience with a democratic form of government. They don't have that kind of expectation.
Mm-hmm.
They come from dictatorships in many cases. So maybe there are some that want the freedom of America, but there are also some that this is their concept of government is this overarching force. And that was the reasoning, because this act was only supported by Democrats, to remake America and make them more complacent with more dictates by a more socialistic government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so those kind of people, as you're saying, would tend to obey with vigor these various mask ordinances or whatever they happen to be, and might even rat on their neighbors, which is being encouraged in some places.
I mean, it's the sad part of it is that back in the turn of the century, immigrants were met by people who were pro-American and wanted to assimilate them, help them acclimate to American society, and they wanted to do that as well. Now you have people who meeting them on the border from the ACLU, from the National Lawyers Guild, from MEFA, these left-wing organizations who want to help them get on benefit, welfare, and who want to help foster a multicultural identity, as the very identity that they got out of to come to this country. I mean, it's so that's, I mean, I see that as more the issue than the immigration. I mean, you can have a tremendous immigration of patriotic people. I mean, I'll point out, for example, the Vietnamese boat people and the Hmong people.
Yeah.
They were incredible immigrants, contributed hugely to our society, pro-America, wanting to be American. I think you could say the same thing about Haitians. But, I mean, we talk about people who want to come here and get into business and create things. but they're encountering these groups at the border and in this country who themselves, even though they personally are usually up the top percentage financially, they have an anti-American attitude. So that's really the issue, not the immigrants that we might welcome in, but the fact that we no longer ask people to assimilate and acclimate,
Well,
and that we have
what I
people
was
who don't
saying
want
was
to.
that the intent was
Right.
shifted to other countries, and my interpretation is with the hope that those people might not have this tradition. Now, obviously,
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, exactly, and that's particularly true. Like with the pushing to bring in Syrian refugees,
yeah,
Somali refugees, they're creating special interests that they can, if anything, they're encouraging the old way of thinking. They're not teaching Americanism. They want them to be, you know, become a pliant block of voters and supporters for their authoritarian views. These are people who have more ideologically in common with the very countries that these people are getting out of.
yeah, for sure.
And I mean, you could even see the same phenomena happening domestically. I think we talked about this in terms of liberals leaving the very left wing states and going to more red states and then making those states blue.
Well,
I
in
mean,
your home state of Massachusetts,
yeah,
it's certainly true that New Hampshire was pretty rock hard conservative,
right.
and then enough of you people moved up to transform it
And
from
these are
live free
people
or
who
die.
fled Massachusetts because of the high taxes and the high regulations of business. And they sometimes even commute to Boston from New
Yes,
Hampshire.
yes.
But yeah, I mean, they're taking their habits with them. It's happening. I think like the same thing's happening in Arizona and Idaho with Californians,
Well,
right? I mean,
there's a movement in both of those states. I mean, obviously you can't do anything about it, but they're making people very aware of they don't want this New Hampshire and Vermont phenomenon to occur in their state.
mhm.
I think there's a different tradition in Arizona and Nevada. They still have a bit of that pioneer kind of background, and you even get people that recently moved there that like it just the way it is. But who knows? I mean,
But it seems to be. I mean, and the same thing's happening, I guess, in Virginia with the move from
oh,
Washington
oh,
and maybe even North Carolina. You have all these. I mean, the during the Obama years, I think we mentioned this. The one segment of the economy that actually grew was the public sector.
yeah.
Washington D.C. thriving, and of course Virginia is suburban of Washington. So that state has undergone this kind of transformation,
Well, it's in Northern Virginia,
which is where it's a big
where
population.
a lot of where I live, where a lot of government workers reside. But it's the same thing. They specifically chose to get out of the district. And Virginia at one time was a reliably red state, certainly isn't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And they moved in here. But the irony was that you used to be able to distinguish which side of the Potomac, because Maryland was always liberal,
Right.
Going back 100 years or more.
Sure.
But Virginia was more conservative, and still, if you get below the Occoquan, it's more real Virginia at that point. So,
Yeah, but the liberal Virginia is taking over because
yeah,
just
oh,
out of sheer numbers,
yeah. There's
and even I think that's happening in West Virginia too. I mean, I think, but maybe I'm wrong.
well, not as much. I mean, that's a
Okay.
pretty heavy commute.
So, Mike, I'm feeling better from talking to you.
Well, that's why I'm here.
Exactly. I hope that our viewers and listeners are feeling a little better. But it's just going to be a nail biter right up to the last minute. I can't relax. There's so much at stake, and I hear I mean, Steve Turley. I mean, he's great, but I just worry that he might be doing a little happy talk. And when I think about the forces that are arrayed against Trump and against us, and their willingness to do anything to stop Trump, I mean, I don't know what they might pull next. I mean, it's just, we can't even imagine it.
Well, okay, but my interpretation is, yeah, there's just some bad actors, but a lot of these people are willing to say anything, but fundamentally, they're cowards. The latest thing, and this came out of no less than the American Enterprise Institute, which isn't what it used to be.
Yeah.
Two of the scholars over there actually came out and said that Amy Coney Barrett should be impeached if she doesn't recuse herself from any election-related case, which is absurd on its face because the last thing you would want is an even number. The case has to be decided.
Oh, the fact that she's there, that is a huge nail in the coffin of the left. You know, and I think I mentioned to you that Elizabeth Warren sent out a tweet saying that the process of confirming Amy Coney Barrett is unconstitutional. And I said, well, I mean, or they said it was illegitimate. And my response, I forget exactly what I said, but it got a lot of tweets, is, are you implying that the Republicans knocked off Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Right? I mean, there's nothing illegitimate about it. Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away at the time she passed away. I mean, that's the way, as the old saying goes, that's the way the cookie crumbles.
Well, I mean, the fact is, it was her mistake when Obama begged her to retire.
Well, that's right. But the point is, this is how it's happened. And if there's anybody they want to be angry at, it should be her.
Yeah.
But anyways, the fact that Barrett is in there now is very, very key in a literal sense, because if they try to overthrow the election, you know, I think that she's going to be there to keep things honest. Now, how do you think that plays with the regular electorate? The fact that she now has been confirmed and that she's on the Supreme Court. I mean, I'm already seeing hysteria coming out of people saying that she's going to overthrow gay marriage and that, which is ridiculous because no one's going to challenge gay marriage. Gay marriage is there for good. I mean, that's already a bridge crossed. You know, that's not going to happen. But you hear this kind of stuff. So do you think any of that's going to stick? I mean, what do you think? Do you think that she's an asset? I personally do, but what do you think?
All right. Well, she's a huge asset because there's a couple of kind of unsaid remarks here, which I will say. All right. If you compare her to any of the other female justices, the truth of the matter is she's the only one who's actually a legal scholar. All right. Ruth Ginsburg was, God bless her, the ACLU lawyer. And that's fine. And she was a real advocate for her side. The other two, Sandra Day O'Connor was no legal giant. No one's going to argue against that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other two, Kagan and Sotomayor, were, I think, put in as little more than affirmative action hires. You know, it looked good. Obviously, they were in the federal system, so it's not that they're incompetent. But if you're talking about someone who's a true blue legal scholar, who went through the whole confirmation process with a blank notepad, come on, man. You know.
No, I don't know much about Sotomayor, but I do think that Kagan is a legitimate scholar. I think she was the dean of Harvard Law School, and she's written extensively. So I don't know if I would.
Well, you know, I would. Maybe she's got some claim to that, but
put it this way: they have about as much claim to it as any of the men have.
Yeah, well, the whole thing is political. Obviously.
I mean, I don't know if, I don't think that, historically, I don't even believe that Earl Warren was even a lawyer.
No.
So, you know.
And he was conservative until he wasn't.
Exactly. Once he was on the court, Eisenhower was once asked, did he have any regrets after he left office? And he said, yeah, two. And they're both sitting on the Supreme Court, that being Brennan
Earl Warren.
Warren. Yeah.
Well, Warren was the guy. I mean, imagine this, because many of your viewers, are younger and may not realize that the big architect, besides FDR, of the internment of the Japanese was Earl Warren.
Well, as governor of California.
Yeah.
Exactly. He was. That's right.
And to put it in perspective, obviously there were many people against it, including that noted civil libertarian J. Edgar Hoover. So
there you go.
For him to go from, I wouldn't even call it conservative, from that kind of position to then the completely turning around with the 1960 stuff, which changed a lot. And it was all changed by the court, starting with the prayer decisions.
Yes.
And that's when I think the libs really discovered that they could legislate from the bench in this manner. And the reason they're so upset is they actually believe it's a God-given right that the Supreme Court should be liberal. And indeed it has been for the last
they see it as
years.
It's the center of their power. And I mean, even if God forbid Trump loses, I mean, the fact that he put in these 3 judges and that he's put in, I think, almost 200 judges there
are no vacancies now.
It's an incredible accomplishment, an amazing feat that, liberal or conservative, we should be grateful that we have judges who are going to review cases and look at the Constitution and when they make decisions, not act like dictators. I mean, Barrett herself said it best. She goes, "Look, I'm not here to be a queen. I'm here to review cases. That's my job. Look at the Constitution and take a look at what is constitutional. That's what they're supposed to do." And I think the left is pretty open in their claim that they want the Supreme Court to run things, as almost like
not anymore.
Well, yeah, thank God. I mean, and plus this puts Roberts in his place. So yeah, it's a great day for. I think that people are going to see it as a great victory. She's a great role model for young women. I keep hearing them talk about young women are going to look up to Kamala Harris. I don't think so.
What's there to look up to?
Oh, she's dreadful. But the point is that you've got we can mention Amy Coney Barrett. There's a role model, somebody who actually has, some accomplishment and something going on upstairs, so to speak. Somebody who actually is thoughtful. So I think it's all a good day for conservatives that she's in there. I would expect hysteria and shrill yelling about it, but I don't think most people are going to believe that. I don't think it's going to fly.
Yeah, well, you have to distinguish between the hysteria that you're seeing in the media about everything and like the typical person. I mean, it's hard for you and me to appreciate this, maybe, but most people don't really follow this stuff very carefully. They obviously know who's running for president and they've decided who they're going to vote for. But in terms of all these granular details that you and I love discussing, they're just not into it. And I would argue that maybe they know the importance of the Supreme Court, but they don't go as crazy about this. The left is freaking out because that's all they had. They thought it was a birthright.
Yeah, this was terrible news for them, and it's a great day to see this happening as it did. It's almost providential in a way that the court has been sealed like this, and it's going to be that for a long time. Unless God forbid, I suppose if Biden wins, it won't be like that because you'll have him putting in leftist judges. But
I'm not sure it's going to be so easy, even if he wins, to pack the court.
No, but even you've got some judges who might retire and that kind of thing. I don't know about Pack. I don't think he's going to get away with packing the court. And he's already practically said that he would because they're setting up a special commission to look into that.
Yeah. Well, notice how they've changed the definition of that word. Okay, packing the court means that there's too many conservatives.
Well,
That's
right,
the
right.
new definition of the word.
The new definition is that Trump already packed the court by appointing conservatives. Yeah, that's a good one. I don't think people buy that, but yeah, that's
No, and
that's
this is the disconnect between all this nonsensical rhetoric and what what people, what the common man, so to speak, who isn't such a political junkie, actually thinks. Yeah, there's people on the left that's all they do is consume political media. There's people on the right that, like you and me, that check the various websites 50 times an hour, you know, but normal people aren't like that.
Right. I mean, and by the way, I mean, I look at the TikTok of Robert B. Reich.
Oh God.
And he's all over.
With his Truth Commission.
Yeah, no, and also he's all about, you know, the conservatives have packed the court. You know, this is his thing.
What is his problem? Wasn't he from your area somewhere?
Yeah, a classic leftist. He's from Boston. He's here. He's in Cambridge. He's just a classic liberal, you know, guy. More, I mean, he ran for governor of Massachusetts, and he only got the most liberal communities like Cambridge and Provincetown and Berkshire County, which is all populated by New Yorkers, rich New Yorkers. And that's all. I mean, he did very poorly. So he's even to the left here.
Wow. How does someone get like that?
Great question. You know, it's a faith. People look for meaning in life, and they don't believe in God, so they are attracted to belief in human power.
But don't people grow out of this stuff? I mean,
no, it becomes they internalize it, and it dictates the rest of their life. There's no questioning.
Your buddy David Horowitz.
My buddy who?
David Horowitz.
Oh yeah.
Was a red diaper baby.
He did. He grew out of it.
And he grew out of it, and he grew out of it from practical experience.
He's unusual. He's unusual. I mean, he actually did have a moral compass, and that led him to seeing some of the atrocities being committed by the left, particularly the Black Panthers, which he covered in the mid-'70s in Berkeley. Right. And he had an awakening, but I think that's unusual. I don't think that a guy like Robert B. Reich, he's going to be goose-stepping and zig-heiling right up to the grave.
Okay, but let's talk about the contrast between Horowitz and him for a moment. Okay, Horowitz was pretty hardcore.
Yeah, both of them Jewish revolutionaries.
Yes, but
let's be honest.
He was able to have his actual life experience affect these cherished beliefs somehow. And how does a guy like Robert Reich walk around? I mean, yeah, he's always in this echo chamber, but at some point, he's got to get out of that echo chamber, you know?
Well, maybe that is. I mean, you're kind of touching upon maybe the difference there in that David Horowitz and some of his other colleagues, like Peter Collier and other guys, they were on the street. You know, they were activists who actually were doing things. They were thinking and they were writing books. Whereas a guy like Robert B. Reich, I mean, he never leaves the ivory tower. He lives in a wealthy suburb. He travels only among fellow travelers, all who attend their fancy soirees.
I think you just solved it.
And so he doesn't have real life experience, right? Whereas a guy like Horowitz actually does. He stepped out and it'd be interesting to do a little survey on leftists who left the left and what, right? How I left the left. How, that's actually something that could be done. And that should be the topic of my next book.
I think that would be a great book.
That would be, and it would give me a chance to really do some fun interviews with people too. That would be something. How I left the left and why, and then maybe bring in some old style leftists like Reich to talk about why he never left. How I left the left and why I never left.
I bet. Left. I think we just discovered that are you going to go out to the real world? Or are you going to stay in your bubble, a la that famous Pauline Kael line in 1972, when she was so surprised when McGovern lost to Richard Nixon. And she said with a straight face, "That's crazy. I don't know anyone who voted for Nixon."
how could this have happened?
Yeah.
There was some of that with Trump too. I mean,
Yeah.
some of there's this one particular meme. I wish I knew who it was, of this woman like going like this. Ah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know the one I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. Of
Oh,
course.
I love that. Oh man. So yeah, I mean, they travel. It's like a cult. You know, they're traveling in these rarefied circles, and it shapes their view of existence. It gives them meaning in life. I mean, this is, and plus the rewards. I mean, look at Robert B. Reich. How many trophies does he have on his wall? I mean, right? I mean, probably the shelf is probably groaning under the weight of the number of awards and the dinners and the ceremonies and the feting and the soirees at the Copley Plaza, and where everybody gets up and they give these glowing speeches about how he's worked in the vineyards and he's suffered and he's so wonderful, and it's like this messianic complex actually. Yeah, so yeah, sure they stay on the left. Why wouldn't they? If I got that, I'd be on the left probably. I mean, right, as I'm thinking about this, I mean, wow.
Yeah.
You
Don't think too much.
no, but he doesn't have, and he's not exactly worried about how to come up with his next dollar either. I mean, there are a lot of incentives. So that's why they're on the left. It's very practical, right? It's I think that's what it comes down to. Whether or not they actually believe in it, they probably submerge.
That's the other point.
Well, they submerged their own minds probably at a fairly early age, and they never went back. They never looked back.
Yeah, well, I think though the common denominator is that they never get out of the bubble.
Right.
And the rare times when they are out of the bubble, like if they're picked up by an Uber driver or something, then they can just dismiss that as just the guy's common rabble and they don't care.
No, that's right. They think it's amusing. It's like they can play around, and they plus they're constantly being told how brilliant they are, right? So I mean, this is, I think I told you, like with Michael Dukakis, it's brilliant, that they come to believe this. They really do. They actually they become. I mean, why not? You're told you're great. Sure, after a while, you think you're great.
Well, I will have to relate to you a story that fits into this.
Yeah.
Many years ago, I was traveling from LA to DC. And as you know, when you get to the Dulles airport, especially in those days anyway, you didn't go directly to the gate. You had to board a bus, and that took you to the arrival gate. Well, anyway, on the flight was Dear Abby, and I recognized her from TV shows and her voice and so on. And I was talking to her on the plane. This is one of my, in those days, very frequent upgrades, because I was traveling 60% of the time. So I was earning, I could put all my friends of it. So anyway, I'm up there and we're talking about politics. I knew she was liberal. And then the issue of abortion comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, well, surely, Mike, you're pro-choice. I said, well, no, as a matter of fact, I'm not. What do you mean? I mean, she's shocked. But I've been talking to you for an hour. You seem like a smart guy. And I said, I am a smart guy. That's why I'm pro-life. And then she was expecting a hallelujah chorus of all the other people in the plane to chime in that I'm an idiot, but instead they denounced her.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then she just couldn't take it. But it was even worse because she couldn't get away right away. And instead, she's on that stupid bus going back to the arrival gate, and all these people are giving her the evil eye. And so here was a liberal, and she was sitting in first class with people who were not of like mind somehow. So I think that may have made an impression.
I mean, I've had a lot of those sorts of experiences. I mean, I remember being at it was during the Bill Clinton impeachment. And my wife and I were at some kind of a social event, and we were talking to several people, and I happened to mention not in a particularly loud voice either, very quietly and very mildly, that I felt that Bill Clinton should be impeached. This was like just before.
Yeah.
The room went like silent. It was like there was a woman who almost passed out. I mean, she became ashen and she almost had to be carried out on a stretcher. I mean, it was like, who is this guy? How did this happen? Who are you? You know, where did you come from? I mean,
How did they let you in here?
yeah, it was like an alien invasion. It was like somebody walked in from like another planet, and the whole chemistry of the room changed. I mean, it was everything. It was really. I mean, I've had this happen many times in my life. I've seen this, and
Well, what type of gathering was it? Was it?
it was just somebody invited us. It was a
So it
social
wasn't
gathering.
some liberal Jewish thing.
No, not
Yeah,
liberal, probably Jewish, I would guess. But we were invited by a friend to come over and meet so and so. I don't know,
Yeah.
something very, very casual. But it certainly changed things. I mean, I'm just this is how that is. You have to
Well,
be
maybe it's
careful.
important who you were going to meet. I mean, was it Abby Hoffman? Or,
No, it wasn't. These were not people on the far left.
Oh, okay.
No, they were like regular suburban types. I mean, it was
Yeah,
not
yeah.
it was not a political event. It was more of a social event.
Yeah.
So I mean, if I had been going to like an Antifa meeting, that's one thing. Right? I don't know, but that wasn't what this was. But anyways, I could tell a lot of. I've had a lot of those stories in my life, and it's not easy. And when you have a family, it makes it even more difficult. If it was just me, I wouldn't care. But you have a family, so you have to be careful for people.
Well, there was compare that experience to I don't know if you ever heard of a woman named from Brooklyn named Bonnie Rogoff, and she had an organization that was they had a big website in the early days of the internet called Jews for Life.
Oh,
And the thing was, I'm not sure if she was actually Orthodox, but needless to say, that was not very popular in her social circle. And she would call me and she was always stressed out about it. And everyone was attacking her on the street and so on and so forth.
she was probably hated by Jews more than anyone.
Yeah. And
That's like Pam Geller.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Or Laura Loomer in West Palm Beach running for Congress. She's Jewish.
Yeah.
She's the Jews hate her more than anyone.
Because what? God forbid she's a Republican?
Yeah. God forbid she doesn't somehow. I mean, these people are hardcore socialists. I mean, I've seen this. I mean, I experienced this actually. I mean, I can speak to it.
So it's really a case, I think, of you being an intelligent guy, letting them down.
They see you a traitor. I actually had somebody once yell at me in synagogue that I'm a traitor.
Well, were they going to take you before the Sanhedrin and try
Well,
to-
yeah. I mean, it's like a traitor to what? It's sort of. But yeah, I mean, it's a philosophy. It's a belief system that the Jewish people, we tend to be very intense, and this goes back thousands of years. Our walk with God. I mean, we were walking with God 1,000 years before Jesus. It's a personal thing. And that intensity can be channeled in a very good way in terms of being creative and inventing things and being scientists and, financiers and builders and artists and artisans and all the credible things. I mean, Jews have been at the top of so many fields.
Oh, yeah.
But yet it can also be a very bad thing if you have that energy and you become anti-God and you become part of of something that, I mean, I don't want to say evil, but, let's just say a falling away from the principles of the Torah.
Right.
And you bring that same intensity to it, then you become, intense in the other direction. And I think that's happened.
Well, sometimes it works out for the good because you may have heard of a guy named Saul who changed his name to Paul. And
Well, there
he
you
was
go. He used his
intensely
intent. That's right.
attacking the Christians, and then they took that same intensity and became, of course,
That's a very good example
as big
of
apostle.
yeah, and that's a good example of the Jewish spirit, if you will.
Yeah.
That it can be either employed for good or evil, and when it is, it's very extremely good or extremely evil.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's this is one of the issues I get into in my new book. I mean, I'm not going to deny that God is God. So, not to get into a little plug here, but
Go ahead.
the book is out there. It's available. Check it out. It's on Amazon. And
Where could someone get a signed copy?
let me just hold it up. Well, that's a good question. I haven't arranged for that yet, but I'll announce it if and when I do. But it's not a bad book. I mean, it's what I've done with my time in the pandemic. But anyways, speaking of which, Mike, you sent me an email about this young man,
Carlo Acutis.
Yes, I mean, let's talk. We should wrap up with that because
Yeah. Well, that was such a positive story.
Exactly. Very inspiring.
And Carlo Acutis was just a few days ago declared blessed, which is the last step before being canonized as a saint. Now, it could take a long, long time between the two. And he was only 15 years old when he died.
Yeah.
And I've always, in general, been attracted to those very few Catholic saints who were kids.
I always thought of Catholic saints as being people who were older, who were martyred, people who, a lot of women are saints, or people who had experienced some amazing miracle.
Well, okay, that's all true. But the thing that makes these young saints so incredible, and he's not a saint yet, so incredible, is that they didn't have time to do all that. And instead, to be beatified, you didn't have one certified miracle. You need one more to be canonized. The only other way to do it is to be a martyr, which doesn't occur quite as often these days.
Right.
But I sent you that video on him, and
I watched it. It was very, very inspiring. From
the moment he was born, people thought he was something special. He was, but this is the best kind. He was the holy child, but he wasn't obnoxious about it. He was a normal kid, played sports, did stuff
like video games. I mean, he was into tech. He was,
and the tech part of it. He documented a bunch of all over the world, the so-called Eucharistic miracles, where various amazing things can be linked to the real presence in the Eucharist or in the host. But he decided that was his highway to heaven, as he put it. But he was able to do it without being smug about it. He was just like a good kid.
Yeah.
And what happened, and it had to be divine providence, is he died of leukemia, but look, in a period of a couple of weeks. I mean, he was diagnosed and boom, So, and then his mother at his funeral said, as a believer, which she actually came back to the church, being inspired by him, said, this of course is sad, but if I believe in the faith, then I have to assume he's in a better place, and I'm going to try to meet him there and avoid purgatory and so on and so forth. But there's a few other, very small number of child saints, and that was always inspiring to me because, okay, you could be Mother Cabrini and have a whole lifetime to do good works, but to be able to achieve that at the age of 15, or in the case of Maria Goretti, when she was 11, it for me is something special.
Oh, it's a beautiful story. I mean, I think the most famous of saints would be Saint Anthony, who was the saint of the poor, and Saint Francis, who was the saint of animals. And I know that I'm not Catholic, and nor was my father, but my father was a veterinarian, and he had a portrait of Saint Francis because it was very popular for veterinarians to have St. Francis. He was the patron saint of animals and trying to heal animals.
Well, he was Francis is one of the most beloved saints.
Exactly. So I think it was Francis and Anthony, who was the saint of the poor, probably the most beloved of saints. I mean, or I think at least.
Well, there's a long list. I mean, Anthony, on the other hand, lived to be 105 years old, which is saying something in the 3rd century.
And also Saint Augustine is one of the great thinkers.
Great conversion story. Great.
Oh yeah, and he came from sin, and he was there right at the fall of Rome, and at the destruction of his community in North Africa by the Vandals. And his book, The City of God, is a true classic. I mean, it's a great work of theological and philosophical thinking. It's one of the foundations of Western thought. And also his Confessions is an amazing book. I haven't read them all, but I've read in them. And they're very, very inspiring, very important works.
Well, the interesting thing about Augustine is by far, if you go into Liturgy of the Hours, in the Office of Readings has 2 readings. One is typically a biblical passage. The second one is stuff written by church fathers, and overwhelmingly, it's the contributions by Augustine. Despite the fact he died in the early 5th century.
Right.
So but there are some powerful characters. But yeah,
I think one of the takeaways I have with Augustine, and I'm not quoting it, but he said that a king can be more of a slave than a slave, because the slave has only one master, whereas the king can have as many masters as he has vices.
Yeah.
I mean, just an interesting thought.
Yeah, there's a lot of pithy stuff, and the whole thing with that Carlo video. And by the way, I believe that church is in Assisi, where Francis was from.
Right.
Where they show, and it was a positive story.
That's a great story. It's very inspiring, especially now when we need to have faith and inspiration as we're looking at this upcoming event of next Tuesday. Right. I mean, to look at something like that, to take my mind off of what the anxiety that we have.
You realize the next time we meet will be the Wednesday after the election.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we should do like a Tuesday night, commentary while the results come in. What do you think?
Well, to keep it going till 3 a.m.? I don't know.
Well, that's true. Yeah, we'll have to do it the next day. I'm thinking I might live stream through it. I don't know. I'll see. How
actually, what happened last year was, because I don't normally stay up that late, and most people don't.
Right.
But I got sort of energized watching it, especially when he started winning. I was, falling asleep a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I'd get, holy cow. And then
I was up for every minute of that. I was exhausted, but I was absolutely.
I watched the whole thing, and then it was about 2:30 a.m. or something. I go to the bedroom and I tell her, like, well, Trump won. And she wakes up out of a deep sleep. Blah, So,
well, the thing with that was that you really you couldn't totally tell.
No.
It was like when the Red Sox lost the World Series, they wouldn't admit it until the next day.
Yeah.
Because there was such a fumble where the ball rolled through Bill Buckner's legs. I mean, it was like, oh my God, that nobody quite could wrap their mind around what had happened.
Curse of the Bambino.
Yeah, well, that's right. So, I mean, I thought the Trump victory was like that because they wouldn't admit it, even after Florida and after, Wisconsin. I mean, they were still, and Hillary, of course, never conceded.
Oh, she never conceded. And not only did they not admit it, you remember when Podesta came out.
Oh, yeah.
And instead of him saying we lost, well, we'll get back to you.
Well, that's right. That's why you couldn't, I was waiting for that, kind of like ba-boom, that moment. Yeah. And it really never came.
No,
but
never occurred.
It didn't. So you kind of knew by 2:00 in the morning, you knew that Trump had won.
As far as I know, it's the only election in modern history that the loser never conceded.
Well, that's how the left rolls now. I mean, look at Stacey Abrams, right? She still thinks she's governor. She's deluded. She's delusional. She still claims that she's governor of Georgia. She lost by more than 1%. I mean, it was close, but it was, even if they, after recounts, it was still a loss.
Right.
So That's how they roll. They're not even dealing with reality at all. Anyway,
All right.
it's totally graceless.
So I guess
So
we'll
we'll
have
see.
something
So
to
I'll
say.
see you. I'll see you the Wednesday after the Tuesday.
Oh, wow.
Let's hope. I feel better talking to you though, Mike. I
Well,
mean,
good.
it's all good.
I'm glad I could help.
I hope that my
And
viewers do
everybody
too.
watching this, you know what to do. You know who to
Yes.
vote for.
That's right. And tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your family. You know, this is very important. Every single vote counts. You know, it's one man, one woman, one vote. It's a sacred right. You know, this is the one sort of act we perform as American citizens. That's an expression of our citizenship. It's the closest thing we have to a sacred right. And I just hope that people do it and get out there, vote. And if you're voting for Trump, vote early and vote often. Anyway.
Over 70 million people have already voted.
And you know something? It's not working for them either, because a lot of they were expecting a big, early turnout. Ain't happening. So
Yeah.
that's good news. Hopefully, God willing.
All right.
All right, Mike. So
we will see you next time.
yep. Thanks a lot, Mike.
See you
Talk
later.
to you then. All right. Bye-bye.